today we've got Roy Taylor, and if you don't know who Roy Taylor is, you just don't know type 2 diabetes research. He's been leading the way for a long time, but has really driven home the methods around type 2 diabetes reversal. So it's something I've followed quite closely. Welcome, Roy. How are you going?
Doing very well, thanks, Ray. It's good to be talking to you.
From the other side of the world.
Indeed, but the world is very small these days, despite our pandemic.
Yeah. Look, let's jump straight into it. And you've been working with type 2 diabetes around that area for a while. What was a daunting moment when you thought to yourself, "Wait up, this could be reversible"?
Well, there was a long run up to that dawning moment, in that I'd been chasing what happened to food in the body and discovering that 30% of our meal carbohydrate ends up in muscle glycogen. But if it doesn't, as in people who are insulin resistant, then it's just got to be stored as fat. And that led me on to investigating liver fat. And then all of a sudden, we could see the whole pattern because, hey, we're dealing with a simple disease. This is the commonest disease of Homo sapiens. And yet all the complexity around could not possibly explain that. And looking hard at this and thinking about it, I came up with the twin-cycle hypothesis in 2006. So that was really the eureka moment when I saw that if people were eating just a little bit extra each day, especially if they have this insulin resistance in muscle, then the body would be shunting that into fat. The fat in the liver would build up. That would actually directly cause more glucose to be produced by the liver. That's the big source of glucose in our bodies. But also, the fat would spill over and silt up throughout the body. And that would include the pancreas. We knew from some brilliant work by Roger Unger back in the 1990s that if you take isolated islets and expose them to excess fat for a few days, then they begin to stop responding acutely to glucose. So we could explain everything in a oneer, but that was just the twin-cycle hypothesis. And so I then had to turn around and really find out if this was robust. And then setting about trying to destroy your own hypothesis, well, that was the next phase of the work.
That's great. And so was that where you started working in towards the counterpoint study, was it?
That's absolutely right, because quite clearly we could destroy this hypothesis in a oneer. And of course, that's what science is all about. You've got to try and destroy your hypothesis. Anyone who goes about trying to prove their own hypothesis has rather missed the point. So I could see that if we were to suddenly drop the food intake of folk with ordinary type 2 diabetes, and if sugar didn't return to normal and the pancreas didn't recover, then I was wrong. And I completely failed to destroy the hypothesis, because in that group of people with very ordinary type 2 diabetes, the fasting sugar level became normal, not just significantly reduced, it became normal in 7 days. And the pancreas showed a very interesting response. The change was much more gradual there, but by 8 weeks, amazingly, the beta cells had woken up. Now, bear in mind that the whole expert world of diabetes believed that beta cell death or apoptosis was the cause of type 2 diabetes. Well, no, we're seeing that the beta cells were merely dormant, and you could wake them up, at least in early type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, and I've got to say that as I was following your research, as it's been going on over the last sort of 10 or so years, it's really been like I've seen it in my own work. Like I don't have the labs and things where we work out in the bush with our programs, but in medical centers, and the response we saw, especially within those 7 days. And then, we've got people that have got off insulin after 20, 30 years, and it's been 3, 4, 5, 6 years now. And and their body's working fine. And there'll be a lot of, you would have heard it before. Oh no, but once they go back to their old ways of eating, the diabetes will come back. No, I haven't seen that.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Because of course that criticism was raised for my work, the diabetes is going to inevitably creep back. But of course it doesn't, because we now know the reason. Under the stress of the excess fat around the beta cells don't die, they just lose their specialist function. What they do is very sensible. They go into a selfish mode and they stop working for the body. They just work to keep themselves alive. So forget this insulin production nonsense. They're going to just hunker down. But if you take away the fat, then they can come out of their shells, as it were, and just start performing again. Now, there's clearly some genetic influences here. For a start, some people can be as fat as they like and they'll never get type 2 diabetes. Interestingly, that's the majority of us. If we look at people with a BMI over 45, only 28% have got type 2 diabetes. So that's the majority. People do not have beta cells that are sensitive to fat and glucose oversupply, but some people do. And there's a further property, because I've just described the susceptibility of the beta cell to fat. If the individual can actually have resilient beta cells, so they can hunker down, they can go into their self-protect mode and stay hunkered down, but retaining the ability to recover for years, even decades, as we've seen, then they have resilience, and that has to be a genetic factor. So having determined those two factors, the geneticists ought to get busy, because we've shown the phenotyping. Come on, boys, show us the genotyping. Interestingly, almost all the genetic influences shown for type 2 diabetes relate to genes that are to do with beta cell function. So you see, this does tie together. And I know from my own observations that once diabetes goes away, provided there's no weight regain, then it stays away. And my longest duration patient is now 16.5 years and running. So we can be quite clear about the possibilities here.
And what percentage of the population with type 2 diabetes do you think it's possible to achieve remission?
That's a very good question. And the answer is far higher proportion than most doctors would imagine.